A short distance from here is the old bridge over the River Ann at Delnashoch. It's there we're going to meet up with Fiona and Neil again. Fiona's going to sing that lovely old Gaelic song, Fiona Bhàta, or in English, The Boatman.